Your next news update is at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. I got to make a correction. I hate when I do this. I hate when I offer a misspoken cultural reference, but I confused my Brothers Grimm with my Washington Irving. I made a Rumpelstiltskin reference when I meant to make a Rip Van Winkle reference in terms of the Republican Party in Illinois being asleep low these many years. So anyway, correcting.
And I made a mistake earlier. I didn't know that Craig Robinson was divorced, and he is divorced. Hence the podcast where they're going to give advice on pretty much about everything, politics, life, and marriage.
It's very exciting, although not very many people find it exciting so far, apparently.
25,000 views, that's it. Oof.
All right, we talked about it a bit last hour. I want to talk about it some more. The expected reaction from the usual quarters to the news out earlier this week that 1,300 and some odd Department of Education employees would be relieved of their positions with maybe another 1,000 or so to go, reducing the headcount there by half. Linda McMahon, the Department of Education Secretary, saying her charge is to basically wind down the agency. So some of that can be done through reductions in force and repurposing of funds, and some of that will be required of Congress if the agency is to go away altogether. Here's Randy Weingarten blathering on about it on MSNBC and with MSNBC flacks like Molly Jong-Fast.
This is why so many people are so mad about it, because they're just taking opportunity away from kids that don't have it. So billionaires, kids of billionaires, they have it. They go to private schools. Everyone else, 90%, go to public schools. Don't take away their opportunity.
So let's stay on the facts.
Sorry,
no,
I'm really angry about this.
No, because this
I'm
is what
really
people
angry.
need to hear.
I taught kids in Clara Barton High School in Brooklyn, New York.
She's very passionate about funding the education bureaucracy at the state and local level with federal dollars. She's very passionate about that. And this is why, the alternative of block granting federal dollars to states to use at their discretion when it comes to K through 12 is a non-starter for her.
Equally pernicious, they're saying, oh, don't worry, let's block grant it. So we'll give it to a state education department. Right. So, and then let the state education department decide what to do. So we know, for example, what Texas would do.
Right.
They'll use it for vouchers. So they won't give it to the kids who have it now. They'll just give it for vouchers.
Catholic schools, religious schools.
Yeah, I mean, could you think of a situation worse than, rather than funding a centralized bureaucracy, you give those resources to families to make individual decisions about their child's education? Could you imagine living in a dystopia like that?
And by the way, the school where she taught, Clara Barton High School, the school often ranks low among New York high schools due to issues like absenteeism and poor exam results.
Michael McShane is the director of national research at EdChoice. He's also the co-author of Getting Education Right, a conservative vision for improving early childhood, K-12, and college, that he co-authored with our friend Rick Hess from the American Enterprise Institute. Michael McShane, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning.
So you heard from Randy Weingarten on behalf of all the teachers in the American Federation of Teachers and teachers union apparatchiks around the country. Block granting it, unacceptable. Voucherizing it, unacceptable. Status quo, that's what's acceptable.
Well, this is what's so funny is that if you wind back the history a little bit and you think about times in which actually Republicans, George W. Bush, were pushing for a more muscular federal role, so actually having the federal government play a bigger role in education by doing this crazy idea of trying to measure whether or not the billions and billions of dollars actually did anything. It was the Randy Weingartens of the world who hated that. They were like, no, we don't want to have a big federal role in government. So if anything, she's kind of one of the authors of this. because when Joe Biden came in and any of the stuff that Democrats had sort of tepidly tried to advance with related to education reform, and he said, basically, we're not doing any of that. I'm going to basically give the unions whatever the heck they want on any issue. Now people say, well, then what really is the point of the Federal Department of Education? If it's really just conduits of federal money, why not block grant it? You know, so it's a cruel
because
irony.
Texas might.
It's a hilarious irony.
Well, but the why not block grant? You heard that's just as pernicious because some states might not use it to just turn around, just block grant it to government school districts. Some states could use it, heaven forbid, to fund scholarships for kids so that parents can make their own choices. We don't want that.
Oh no. What could possibly be so terrible about that? Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's important for people to realize when it comes to the federal role in education that in K-12, they spend about 10 cents of every dollar. The vast majority of that money is appropriated by Congress in two programs, Title I, which is money for low-income students, and IDEA, which is additional funding for students with special needs. And I think all of us have to ask these questions. Okay, the Department of Education has been around since 1979. This has been the primary thing that it's supposed to do, is help low-income kids and students with special needs. How are we doing? Do we think that these investments have paid off? Do we think that the oversight that they've given has paid off? And if not, what is this big problem with trying something different and saying, hey, listen, maybe we're too far removed from the classrooms and the teachers and the schools to effectively administer this? We do want to provide this additional funding because we know low-income kids and students with special needs cost more to educate. That's fair enough. But why don't we just push the money to the people closest to the decision-making and empower them to solve problems for their students?
Can you just provide us with some of the sort of the best and latest data research on the performance of kids in scholarship systems that feature scholarships, so a kid can take his scholarship and go to the private or public school of his choice? Compare that to the centralized Politburo model practice in places like Chicago.
Yeah, I can tell you, with respect to private school choice, there have been 17 randomized control trials. This is the highest standard of research where you hold a lottery, half the kids get, some places there are vouchers or scholarships or whatever the term of them is, half the kids don't. We compared the outcomes. 11 of those found positive results, 4 found no difference between the treatment and control group, and 2 found negative results. When you look at attainment, which is students graduating from high school or matriculating to college, there have been 7 studies of those. 5 of them found positive results. I think 2 found no results between treatment and control. And on a host of other issues, whether it comes to safety, desegregation, civic values and outcomes, parent satisfaction, fiscal effects, hundreds of studies have been conducted, the vast majority of which have shown that the private school choice model, those schools and the students that are in them perform better than similarly situated students in traditional public schools.
Right. I mean, it just seems so commonsensical, even if you didn't have the studies. In every other aspect of life, people like choices. They like to choose what fits them best. And for some reason, in K through 12 education, if you don't have the resources that provide choice, you're supposed to just settle for wherever you are able to move and whatever they provide at the local level. This discrimination by address and household income that occurs. It's the most really silly argument, and yet despite the fact that it's not even a popular argument anymore, I think a lot of scales have fallen from a lot of eyes over the last 30 years. Despite the fact it's not a popular argument, the systems, these Politburo-style systems in big cities in particular, and blue states in particular, persist.
Well, and I want to, if there's one more empirical finding that I can share with you that I think a totally reasonable concern that people have. People say, well, okay, if you are to give students vouchers or education savings accounts or tax credit scholarships, whatever you want to call them, what about the kids who are left behind in public schools? Sure, they can have an opportunity to go somewhere else, and that'll be good for them. I can tell you the overwhelming empirical evidence, and there's basically no debate of this in the academic community, which is a wild place to be, and most things there have been meta-analyses that have shown this, that the students who remain behind in public schools do better as a result of the competition from private school choice programs and as a result of allowing students, as you mentioned, to be able to sort into schools that best fit their needs. It's good for the student who gets to go to that new school, but it's also great for the kids in the old school, because if that kid was in the classroom not doing well, that's taking time and energy and resources to help them when it's just not a good fit for them. So they move on to a school that works for them, and the kids that are left behind in the traditional public schools are better off as well, because the only people that are there are the ones who are thriving in that environment.
I see that yesterday you had an opportunity to talk about school choice research in front of Congress. Did you persuade any of those lawmakers to maybe change their mind?
As much as I would love to think my eloquence carried the day, I have to be honest, in some ways it was a frustrating hearing. In other ways, it was a very illuminating hearing, because I think you can go back and watch it on YouTube, I think many of the Republican congresspeople had really great questions where they were really trying to get to the nub of the issue. And unfortunately, it seemed like a lot of the legislators on the other side of the aisle were just sort of repeating the same talking points. And even when evidence was presented to the contrary, where it's like, you think this, well, here's a bunch of evidence that shows that maybe that's not true. Just the next person, when they got their 5 minutes, just sort of asked the same questions over again or asserted the same things. And the Republicans would redirect and say, like, well, wait a second. Is there any research on this? Yes. The research doesn't show that. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
To that. So it was a little frustrating in that way.
Well, I mean, these legislators that are wholly owned subsidiaries of the teachers' unions are just, beyond reach. But, but I also want to emphasize that school choice is not a panacea. So the schools can be better, but still not good enough in terms of what we should expect, the kind of education being provided. And we see that with the NAEP scores. And so I wonder what else we should be thinking about and talking about in addition to how money flows and who gets to make spending decisions.
That's a fantastic question, because I think of even where we are in the school choice movement right now. As you've mentioned, states all across the country are adopting some of these big universal programs that I think really represent a substantial change, but there's still a small number of states that have really gone full bore. I think of that line from Winston Churchill that says, this isn't the end, it's not even the beginning of the end, but it may be the end of the beginning. And so now I think we have to get to some of the questions that you raised here, which is thinking about how do these new schools get great teachers? If the teacher preparation that we currently have is not helping them get teachers that are aligned to what they're trying to do, we need to really think about how we prepare our teachers, and maybe we need to stand up new schools of education or new teacher preparation programs outside of schools of education to help them. We need to think about a lot of these new schools that are starting are having a mare of a time trying to find space to operate. We have a really kind of outmoded regulatory system that assumes if you're opening a quote-unquote school, it's 600 kids in 30 classrooms and whatever, and so that's how the fire rules and all that stuff works. A lot of these new innovative models are quite small. They might only have 20 or 30 kids in a room or two, and they are having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get sprinkler systems. They're having to conduct monthly fire drills when really it's like just walk out that door over there. So we have to think of the regulatory model in which a lot of these schools work, and I think we need to help students. We need to solve transportation problems so they can find these schools and have access to them. We need to help give them information about what they're offering. So you're right. There's a whole new set of problems. Now, these are good problems to have because we've gotten over some of the big hurdles of giving kids more opportunities to the schools that they want to get into, but they are hurdles nonetheless.
Michael McShane is the Director of National Research at EdChoice. He's also the co-author of Getting Education Right, a conservative vision for improving early childhood, K-12, and college, that he co-authored with the American Enterprise Institute's Rick Hess. Michael McShane, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
At almost free